Connor Cruise was 11 years old when he stopped speaking to his mother forever. Isabella, his sister, was 8. There was no funeral, no accident. Their mother was still alive, living just a few miles away. But they belonged to a sect, Scientology, and the organization had ordered them to erase her from their lives, and they obeyed. Years later, Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise's ex-wife, tried to hold back her tears when she was asked about her children. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if that single gesture could erase decades of pain. "They're Scientologists," she said with a broken smile. That coded word meant something terrible. Her own children saw her as toxic, as someone dangerous, as someone who needed to be eliminated. This isn't just the story of Tom Cruise, the most famous actor in the world. It's the story of how a religion can tear a family apart, of how 3 children grew up choosing an organization over their own mother, and of how a father allowed all of it to happen without doing anything to stop it. What you're about to hear doesn't appear on red carpets or in TV interviews. These are the secrets Tom Cruise never wanted you to know. Because behind that perfect smile, there's a truth Hollywood prefers to ignore. And that truth begins with 2 adopted children who lost their mother and a biological daughter who grew up never truly knowing her siblings. On December 18, 1992, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman signed the adoption papers for Isabella Jane. She was just 1 month old. Her biological mother had given her up because she couldn't support her. Tom held her in his arms at the hospital, wrapped in a moment millions of men experience when they become fathers. Nicole cried with happiness. They had tried for years to have biological children, enduring miscarriages that devastated Nicole every single time. Isabella was their miracle. 3 years later, Connor arrived, another adopted baby. The family felt complete. Or at least that's what they believed. What no one knew then was that every decision, every birthday, every goodnight hug would be watched and approved by an organization that had spent decades controlling every aspect of Tom Cruise's life. Scientology wasn't just his religion. It was his family, his identity, his reason for existing. And when 2 worlds collide inside a home, someone has to lose. Nicole Kidman was never a Scientologist at heart. She attended some courses, smiled in photos with the organization's leaders, but deep down she knew something didn't fit. She grew up in a Catholic family in Australia, where her father was a psychologist and biochemist. Scientology despises psychology, labeling it a dangerous pseudoscience. Every visit Nicole made to her father, every conversation about his work, was technically a betrayal of the principles Tom worshipped. But she endured. She endured because she loved her children. She endured because she loved Tom, or at least the man he had been before the organization absorbed every fiber of his being. The children grew up in a strange world. On the outside, they seemed to have everything: mansions, vacations, private jets, red carpets where cameras adored them. But inside, their education was meticulously designed by Scientologist tutors. They didn't attend regular schools. They didn't have friends outside the circle. From the age of 5, Isabella and Connor attended courses where they were taught that the world was divided into Scientologists and suppressives. Scientologists were the good people, those who understood the truth. Suppressives were enemies, toxic individuals who had to be disconnected from your life. Nicole watched all of this with a growing sense of dread. She tried to balance things to give them normal moments, taking them to the park, reading bedtime stories, but she felt she was losing the battle. Tom was completely committed. Whenever she questioned something, he looked at her with that expression he had perfected on screen. Calm, serene, but with steel underneath. In 1998, Nicole did something very few people know about. She wrote a letter, 10 pages long, addressed to Scientology's leadership, asking that her children not be subjected to auditing until they were adults. She kept a copy in a safety deposit box. What that letter contained wouldn't become known until years later. But before we get there, Nicole's world was about to collapse in ways she could never have imagined. The year 2000 was the breaking point. Tom and Nicole were filming Eyes Wide Shut with Stanley Kubrick. It was a film about marital secrets, about lies hidden behind social masks. The irony was brutal. On set, the tension between them was palpable. Kubrick, the obsessive director, made them repeat scenes over and over, forcing them to expose emotional cracks. Nicole broke down in take after take. Tom remained impenetrable. During the shoot, something strange happened after every filming day. Tom would return to the hotel and spend hours on the phone. From the adjoining room, Nicole overheard fragments of conversations. Words like suppressive, handling, disconnection floated through the walls. She knew they were talking about her. She knew something was being planned. She just didn't realize how devastating it would be. When filming ended, Nicole knew her marriage was over, but she had no idea what was coming next. If this story is hitting you, stay with me. Because what happened when Tom asked for a divorce changed the lives of 3 children forever. On February 5, 2001, Tom Cruise publicly announced his separation from Nicole Kidman. She was filming in another country when she found out. There was no prior conversation, no warning, just a call from her publicist telling her the media already knew. Nicole felt the ground disappear beneath her feet, but the worst part wasn't losing her husband. It was what she was about to lose next. Isabella was 8. Connor was 6. Old enough to understand that mom and dad wouldn't be together anymore, but too young to comprehend the invisible forces about to tear their world apart. Scientology has a policy called disconnection. It's simple and brutal. If someone is declared a suppressive person, all members of the organization must cut off all contact with them. No calls, no visits, no exceptions. Not even if it's your mother. Nicole Kidman was never officially declared suppressive in public documents, but inside the inner circles, everyone knew. Her father was a psychologist. She had criticized aspects of the organization, and most unforgivable of all, she fought for custody of her children, challenging the authority of Tom Cruise, one of Scientology's most important global faces. Tom's lawyers were ruthless. They used every resource, every connection, every legal tactic available. Nicole fought back. She spent millions on attorneys. But she wasn't just facing a divorce. She was facing a machine designed to protect its most valuable asset. In the end, she signed a custody agreement that shattered her heart. Tom would have primary custody. She would be allowed to see her children on specific days, under specific conditions. But the visits began to fade. Isabella and Connor started canceling plans with their mother. At first, the excuses sounded reasonable. They had classes. They were tired. They preferred staying home. Nicole tried not to push. She didn't want to be seen as the overbearing mother forcing time together. But deep down, she knew something else was happening. Connor, who had always been affectionate, grew distant. He looked at her with a coldness that didn't belong in a 7-year-old. Isabella, naturally more reserved, simply stopped answering calls. Nicole would wake up in the middle of the night, checking her phone, waiting for a message that never came. What Nicole didn't know at the time was that Isabella and Connor were being audited. In Scientology, auditing involves connecting you to a device called an e-meter, similar to a lie detector, and asking deeply personal questions about your life. For adults, it's invasive. For children aged 7 and 8, it's pure indoctrination. They were asked about their mother. Does she say negative things about your father? Do you feel bad after spending time with her? Do you think she wants to pull you out of Scientology? Every question was designed to plant doubt, to construct a narrative where Nicole was the villain, and the children, who just wanted to feel safe, who just wanted stability in the chaos of a divorce, began to believe it. There is an audio recording of one of those sessions. It was leaked by a former Scientologist in 2016, though the organization denied its authenticity. In it, you can hear the voice of a small child, possibly Connor, answering questions about his mother. "Do you feel confused when you're with her?" the auditor asks. "Yes," the child answers, his voice trembling. "Do you think she understands what's best for you?" "I don't know." "Do you trust your father more?" A long pause. "Yes." If that recording were ever officially confirmed, it would change everything. But for now, it exists in legal limbo, neither proven nor disproven. Tom didn't have to say anything himself. The system did it for him. The tutors, the auditors, the Scientologist friends surrounding the children all repeated the same message. Mom is suppressive. Dad protects you. The organization is your real family. And slowly, Nicole Kidman was erased from her own children's lives. In 2004, 3 years after the divorce, Nicole attended a public event, A journalist asked her about Isabella and Connor. She tried to smile, but her voice broke. "I love them with all my heart," she said. And then she added something few people understood at the time. "They're Scientologists, and I respect that." The word sounded harmless to outsiders, but it was code. It meant they took them from me, and I can't talk about it without risking what little I have left. Nicole had learned a brutal lesson. Every time she criticized Scientology publicly, her children pulled further away. The organization used her words as proof of her toxicity, so she went silent. She swallowed her pain and smiled for the cameras, hoping that one day, when Isabella and Connor were adults, they would see the truth for themselves. But that day was still very far away. After that, the sessions became more frequent. Auditors reported that Isabella was showing signs of doubt. And doubt, the greatest sin inside the organization, required more courses, more auditing, more reinforcement. And then they showed her something. Do you remember the letter Nicole wrote in 1998? The one she kept in a safety deposit box, asking that her children not be audited until they were adults. The organization had a copy. Tom had given it to them years earlier. In 2013, Isabella's auditors showed her fragments of that letter. Not the whole thing, only the parts that could be interpreted as Nicole trying to pull the children away from their father, from their religion, from their identity. They told her that her mother had tried to destroy their family, that all the pain, all the separations were Nicole's fault. Isabella read those fragments and something inside her hardened. She decided she would never doubt again, that her loyalty belonged to her father and to the organization that had raised her. Nicole, the woman who held her as a baby, was reduced to a blurry memory of betrayal. Isabella Cruise grew up in a world where being Tom Cruise's adopted daughter was both a blessing and a curse. She was beautiful, talented, but always living in her father's shadow. In 2015, at 22 years old, she married Max Parker, a British Scientologist. The wedding was small, private, far from Hollywood cameras. Nicole Kidman was not invited. Let that sink in. Isabella got married, and she did not invite her mother. Nicole found out through the media. She saw the photos in magazines. She saw her daughter in a wedding dress, smiling next to a man she didn't even know. She locked herself inside her house for days. Her current husband, Keith Urban, tried to comfort her, but there is no comfort for that kind of pain. And later, Nicole would discover something that makes the story even more devastating. Max Parker, Isabella's husband, hadn't entered her life by chance. Not in the traditional romantic sense. The organization had facilitated their meeting, encouraged the relationship, accelerated the marriage. Isabella had been showing signs of emotional instability. She needed an anchor, something to keep her inside the fold. A Scientologist husband was perfect. Max, who had grown up in the organization and never known any other world, was the ideal candidate. The marriage wasn't forced in the literal sense, but it was orchestrated, manipulated, designed to ensure Isabella would never escape. Isabella has never spoken publicly about her mother. In rare interviews, she talks about her father with admiration, about Scientology with devotion, but about Nicole, only silence. That silence is louder than any accusation. Today, Isabella lives in London. She works as an artist, selling clothing and accessories she designs herself. She has an Instagram account where she shares her work and daily life, but she never ever mentions Nicole. Instead, she posts photos with Tom whenever he visits London. Father and daughter smiling, hugging, as if the family were whole. But it isn't. Someone is missing. Someone has always been missing. Connor Cruise followed a different path. He was always the more reserved child, less interested in fame. He loved fishing, music, sports. After graduating, he tried a short career as a DJ, but it never really took off. Today he lives in Florida, far from Hollywood, spending his days fishing in the ocean and posting photos of his catches online. On the surface, he looks like a happy man living a quiet life. But those who know his story see something else. A man who never had the chance to choose who he wanted to be. He was shaped from childhood to be the perfect son, the obedient Scientologist, the one who never questions. Connor also has no relationship with Nicole. In 2018, a journalist asked him about her. His response was short, rehearsed. "I don't have any problems with my parents. I love them both." It sounded right, but it was empty. How do you love someone you never see? How do you love someone you erased from your life 2 decades ago? In 2019, Connor posted something strange on social media, a photo of an ocean sunset with the caption, "Sometimes silence is the most honest conversation." He deleted it hours later, but some people captured it. Behavior analysts who follow Scientology cases interpreted the post as a crack, a moment of doubt. Because inside the organization, silence is not valued. Everything must be verbalized, confessed, audited. Silence is suspicious. So why would Connor, the obedient son, publicly praise silence? Maybe because it's all he has left when he can't speak the truth. And then there's Suri. She may be the luckiest of the three, but she carries her own burden. She grew up knowing she has two siblings she doesn't know, a father who doesn't call, and a religion that considers her a mistake that should have been indoctrinated. Suri is now 18 years old. She's intelligent, talented, studying at a prestigious university. Katie raised her to be independent, to think for herself, to never be afraid to question. But Suri also carries questions that may never be answered. Why did my father abandon me? Why did he choose an organization over me? In recent years, Suri has been photographed crying on the streets of New York, walking with her mother, a sadness in her eyes no teenager should have. The media speculates, invents stories, but the truth is simpler and more painful. She's a girl who grew up without a father because he chose something else. In 2021, Suri tried something brave. She asked Katie to contact Isabella through social media. She wanted to meet her older sister. Katie, heartbroken but hopeful, sent a message. Isabella saw it. She read it. She didn't respond. 2 weeks later, she blocked the account. Suri cried for days when she found out, not because Isabella rejected her personally, but because she realized her sister was so deeply indoctrinated she couldn't even reply to a simple message. That was the most brutal confirmation that her family would never be whole. 2 years ago, a leaked document revealed something disturbing. In Scientology's internal auditing records, there is a file on Suri. The organization considers her a potential threat because her mother, Katie Holmes, is viewed as suppressive. The file suggests that if Suri ever tried to contact Tom or her siblings, she should be handled appropriately. Handled. That cold, clinical word used to describe how to deal with a girl who just wants to know her family. How is a person supposed to live with that? How is Suri supposed to process the fact that somewhere, in some file, there's a document labeling her a threat? Tom Cruise is now 62 years old. He's still a superstar, still risking his life in mission, impossible stunts, still smiling on red carpets. But behind that carefully constructed image is a man who has lost 3 children in 3 different ways. He lost Isabella and Connor by allowing an organization to indoctrinate them against their own mother. He lost Suri by choosing his religion over her. And in no interview has he ever admitted a single mistake. He's always the devoted father, always the family man, always the victim of a media that doesn't understand his truth. But the truth doesn't need to be understood. The truth simply is. And Tom Cruise's truth is that he built his identity on a foundation that required sacrificing his own children. There's a photo from the 1990s. Tom, Nicole, Isabella, and Connor on a beach. The kids are small, building sandcastles. Nicole is holding Connor on her lap, laughing. Tom is carrying Isabella, her little arms wrapped around his neck. It's the perfect image of a happy family. That photo was displayed in a Hollywood museum as part of an exhibition about celebrity families. Thousands of people saw it and sighed, admiring how beautiful that family was. None of them knew that the family in that photo no longer existed, that the children had been trained to forget the woman who held them, that the man who smiled had chosen a path that would destroy everything that image represented. Only those who made it this far know that truth. And now I'm going to tell you something very few people know, something only those who stayed until this point deserve to hear. In 2016, a former high-ranking Scientologist named Mark Rathbun revealed on a podcast something the organization tried to silence with lawsuits and threats. He said that in 2004, when Isabella was 12 and Connor was 10, the organization created a special program called Project Future. Its goal was to ensure that Tom Cruise's children remained loyal to Scientology for the rest of their lives, because they represented the next generation of public faces for the organization. Project Future included daily auditing sessions, not weekly like other children. It included monitoring all their contacts, friendships, and activities. Any external influence was eliminated. Isabella wanted to study art at a public university. She was told those institutions were full of suppressives. Connor wanted to play soccer on a local team. He was told the coaches wouldn't understand his lifestyle. Every desire, every dream outside the organization was subtly crushed and replaced with alternatives inside the circle. Rathbun also revealed something darker. During those audits, the children were shown videos. Videos of former Scientologists who had left the organization and supposedly ruined their lives. Videos of people crying, bankrupt, alone. They were told this is what happens when you betray your spiritual family. They were told this would happen to Nicole if she ever tried to take them away. They were told it would happen to them if they ever doubted. Isabella and Connor, two children who just wanted to feel safe, absorbed all of it, and it became their reality. This is the privilege of making it this far. Knowing the truth the most powerful organization in Hollywood doesn't want you to know. In 2020, during the pandemic, something extraordinary happened. Nicole Kidman was photographed crying at her home in Nashville. It wasn't staged. A paparazzo captured it from afar. She was alone in her garden, phone in hand. Sources close to her revealed she had tried calling Isabella and Connor. Neither answered. It was Isabella's 28th birthday. Nicole had sent gifts, letters, messages. Silence. Connor didn't respond either. They hadn't spoken directly in years. Nicole had resigned herself to sending gifts and waiting, knowing she would probably never receive thanks. But that day, something inside her broke again. Maybe it was the pandemic, that global moment when families came together, when people called loved ones just to hear their voices. Nicole watched her two younger daughters, Sunday and Faith, running through the house, filling it with life, and she thought about Isabella and Connor and how they would never fill her home that way again. Keith Urban found his wife crying and simply held her. There were no words that could heal that wound. He could only be there as she fell apart. But Keith did something else. He wrote a song. He's never released it publicly, but those who've heard it in private sessions say it's devastating. It's called Living Ghosts. It's about people who are alive but unreachable, about love that exists in a vacuum, about mothers who mourn children who still breathe but are dead to them. Keith wrote that song watching his wife's pain, channeling something Nicole could never express publicly. Critics say Nicole should have fought harder, shouted louder, exposed Scientology publicly, but they don't understand the impossible dilemma she faced. Every time she spoke, every time she criticized the organization, her words were used to convince Isabella and Connor that their mother was toxic, obsessed, anti-science. Nicole had to choose between her public dignity and the remote chance that one day her children might return. She chose silence. She chose to swallow her pain and wait. Waiting without knowing if the end will ever come is its own form of torture. There's something Scientology doesn't want you to know. There's an internal program called Project Celebrity. Its purpose is simple: recruit and retain celebrities because they bring credibility, money, and power. Tom Cruise is their greatest asset. For decades, he has donated tens of millions of dollars. He has defended the organization publicly, even when it damaged his image. He is the face Scientology shows the world to say, look, if he believes in us, we must be legitimate. But the cost of being that face is enormous. Tom can't question, he can't doubt, he can't show weakness. Because if he, the greatest asset, were to leave or criticize the organization, it would collapse. So he's trapped, not physically, but existentially. His entire identity is fused with Scientology. Leaving would mean destroying himself, admitting that the last 40 years were a mistake, admitting he lost his children over a lie. What man has the courage to face that truth? In 2023, something changed. Tom was seen visiting Isabella in London, but this time something was different. Paparazzi noticed Tom leaving her apartment with red eyes. He had been crying. Neighbors said Isabella cried for hours after he left. No one knows what they said to each other. No one knows what conversation happened behind closed doors, but something broke that day. A crack, an admission, a moment of honesty neither of them had dared to face before. Weeks later, Isabella did something unprecedented. She posted a photo of a sunset on Instagram with the caption, "Family is complicated." She didn't mention anyone by name, but for those who follow the story, it was a ray of light after decades of darkness. It was the first time Isabella publicly acknowledged that something in her family wasn't right. The post stayed up for 2 days before being deleted, but those 2 days were enough. Screenshots spread, media speculated. Former Scientologists said, "She's starting to wake up." Isabella and Connor are trapped in their own prison. Their entire lives have been built around principles taught to them since childhood. Leaving would mean questioning everything. Their education, identity, beliefs. It would mean admitting they hurt their mother. It would mean facing decades of guilt and manipulation. It's easier to keep believing the narrative. It's easier to think Nicole was toxic. Tom was the hero who saved them. Scientology was their refuge. Because if they question that, what do they have left? Psychology has a term for this: cognitive dissonance. When evidence contradicts your core beliefs, your brain performs mental gymnastics to avoid collapse. Isabella and Connor have seen former Scientologists speak about abuse, manipulation, disconnection. They've watched documentaries, read articles, heard testimonies. Accepting it would mean accepting they lived a lie. So their minds reject the information, dismiss it as anti-Scientology propaganda, and the cycle continues. But there are cracks, small, almost invisible, but they're there. Connor has shown signs too. In 2022, he was seen at a family event of his biological mother, not Nicole, but the woman who gave him up for adoption 30 years ago. Some former Scientologists who know him say that in private conversations, Connor admits he misses aspects of his childhood with Nicole. He doesn't say he misses her directly, but he talks about how things were before. It's a tiny step, but it's something. In 2024, Connor did something that surprised everyone. He attended a charity event in Los Angeles focused on mental health. Scientology despises psychology and anything related to mental health. For Connor, showing up at that event was a statement, subtle but powerful. When a journalist asked him why he was there, he replied, "I think we all need help sometimes." For most people, that sentence would sound completely normal, but for someone raised in Scientology, where admitting you need outside help is seen as weakness, it was revolutionary. Maybe, just maybe, Isabella and Connor will eventually find the courage to seek the truth for themselves. Maybe one day they'll pick up the phone and call their mother. Maybe Nicole, who has waited for 2 decades, will finally hear the words she's dreamed of. "Mom, I'm sorry. I missed you." Or maybe not. Maybe the manipulation runs so deep they'll never escape. Maybe they'll spend the rest of their lives inside the bubble, convinced they're on the right side of history. Only time will tell. There's one final piece of this story that very few people know. In 2018, a former high-ranking Scientologist revealed something disturbing on a podcast. He claimed that Tom Cruise has a special file inside the organization, a file containing all of his auditing confessions. According to this former member, the file includes information that would destroy Tom's career if it ever became public. The organization uses it as insurance. Tom can't leave because they hold information that could ruin him. We don't know for certain if this is true. There's no definitive proof, but it fits the pattern of how Scientology operates. They collect secrets, confessions, moments of vulnerability, and store them like weapons. If you ever try to leave, if you ever challenge them, they unleash that arsenal and destroy you. Tom Cruise, the man who conquered Hollywood, who risked his life on screen, who amassed unimaginable wealth, is trapped not by physical chains, but by information, by secrets he can't allow to surface. And his children, Isabella and Connor, are trapped by something just as powerful, the belief that only inside that organization are they safe, loved, accepted. Meanwhile, Suri grows up free, but alone. She has a mother who loves her, a normal life, opportunities her siblings never had. But she also carries a void, a father who exists only in magazine photos, siblings who are strangers, A family fractured by decisions she never made. All three of Tom Cruise's children are victims. Victims of a system that prioritizes control over love. Victims of a man who didn't have the courage to choose his family over his religion. Victims of an organization that sees children as tools to keep its members loyal. And the question hanging in the air is this: how many other families have been destroyed this way? How many other children have lost their mothers, their fathers, their siblings? Because an organization decided certain bonds were suppressive? Because this isn't just the story of Tom Cruise's children. It's the story of thousands of families torn apart by Scientology. It's the story of parents who haven't seen their children in decades, of siblings who became strangers, of a system that uses love as a weapon of control. And the most devastating part is that it's still happening. Right now, as you're listening to this, children are being indoctrinated. Families are being fragmented. People are losing the ones they love because an organization decided those bonds were dangerous. Tom Cruise will never give an honest interview about this. He will never admit he allowed his children to be taken from him. He will never acknowledge that Suri grew up without a father because he prioritized his image within Scientology. He'll keep smiling on red carpets. He'll keep being the action hero on screen. He'll keep being Hollywood's perfect face. But we know the truth. We know that behind that smile are three children who grew up without the complete family they deserved. We know there's a mother who cries in private for the children she lost. We know there's a daughter who never truly knew her father. And we know all of this happened because one man chose to belong to something bigger than himself, without realizing that by doing so, he lost the only thing that truly mattered, the unconditional love of his family. Nicole Kidman is now 57 years old. She built an extraordinary career after her divorce. She's won awards, worked with the greatest directors, proven she's far more than Tom Cruise's ex-wife. She married Keith Urban. She has two beautiful daughters, a life many would envy. But in interviews, when she's asked about her four children, she always pauses. It's almost imperceptible, but it's there. She says she loves all her children equally. She says she respects Isabella's and Connor's choices. She says she'll always be there if they need her. But if you look closely, you'll see something no performance can hide. A pain that never heals. A pain you simply learn to carry. The pain of a mother who lost her children without anyone dying. And that, more than anything else in this story, is the most heartbreaking part. So before you finish this video, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you had to choose between your beliefs and your children? Where would you draw the line? At what point would you say enough is enough? Leave your answer in the comments. And if this story affected you, like and share it, because stories like this need to be told. They need to be heard. They need to remind us that behind Hollywood's smiles are real families with real pain and real loss. And if you're wondering what other dark secrets Hollywood hides, what other families have been destroyed by religion, fame, and power, subscribe. There are more stories waiting to be told. Stories of celebrities who lost everything chasing something that was never real. Stories of children raised in golden cages. Stories the world prefers to ignore. But we won't ignore them, because the truth, no matter how painful, always deserves to be heard. This was the story of Tom Cruise's children, a story with no happy ending, no redemption, just a raw, honest truth about the cost of stardom, blind obedience, and lost love. And maybe, just maybe, one day Isabella or Connor will see this video. Maybe they'll hear these words and something inside them will wake up. Maybe they'll remember a woman who held them as babies, who sang them lullabies, who fought for them until she couldn't anymore. Maybe they'll pick up the phone and make the call Nicole has been waiting for 20 years. Or maybe not. Maybe they're too far gone, too deep inside, too convinced by the narrative they were taught. But now you know the truth. And truth that's shared, remembered, discussed is the first step toward making sure stories like this stop repeating themselves. Because as long as we idolize celebrities without questioning the human cost of their fame, as long as we allow organizations to break families in the name of belief, as long as we look away while children are used as tools of control, this story will repeat itself again and again. Tom Cruise's children are just the most visible example. There are thousands more without media attention, suffering in silence, losing their families without anyone writing articles or making videos about them. This story is for them too. For every child who deserved a complete family and received fragments. For every mother waiting for calls that never come. For every parent who chose obedience over love. And it's a reminder to all of us that no matter how successful we are, how famous, how rich, at the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is the love we give and receive. Everything else is noise. Tom Cruise's children grew up surrounded by the loudest noise Hollywood can make and lost the most important melody of all, a united family, unconditional love, bonds nothing should ever break. That is their tragedy, and it's their lesson for the rest of us. Because maybe next time we see a celebrity smiling on a red carpet, we'll ask ourselves what price they paid to be there, what they sacrificed, who they lost along the way. And maybe, just maybe, we'll decide that no belief, no organization, no religion is worth losing the people we love most. That's the truth Tom Cruise will never admit. But it's the truth Isabella, Connor, and Suri live with every single day.